What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. Emergency pod season is back, baby. The New York Jets have hired Aaron Glenn as their next head coach. It is now finally official, long speculated, but official. CR, how you doing? How you feeling?
Good. This is it's a fun one, right? I think any Jet fan that I'm not saying you had to watch Aaron Glenn play, but if you're a certain age range, this one hits a little different because there's a lot of variables. It's not just that he was a Jet, he was a really good Jet, a homegrown Jet. I think it's that there is an extra layer of you really wanting him individually to succeed. And it's not just because we have such great memories of him as a player here, but also there's something too, and Rich Samini's been on top of this from the jump, and this had been going around for the last 2 months or so. Like, this is somebody that really wanted to be here, and there were a lot of other jobs. He was basically asked to interview for every job. We know he said no to New England, but I think he would have been a real player for the Cowboys job. Obviously, the Saints really wanted him, and this is somebody that mentally equipped to take on a place that is not easy, and there is a giant weight on the shoulders of everybody that comes here the longer this playoff drought goes. And I think Aaron Glenn is somebody that just relatively unbothered by that and feels like if I put in the work and I set expectations, good things are going to happen. And I think that's what makes this feel different than the previous hires. I kind of went on a long wind the pod like 2 days ago that hiring Newmark would be hard to get ultimately excited for because it wouldn't feel different from their previous GM hires. You could give them a clean slate, but excitement is different. Aaron Glenn brings excitement because there are different variables and layers to this. And I think he's going to be a really good front man and leader of an organization.
Yes, I think this is a hire that both of us have been pretty excited about, and I think generally expecting. We've talked about some other guys, but Glenn has always been the front runner. It's felt like he's been the front runner since like late in the regular season. And I think a lot of times we get questions like, well, like, why are you and Connor like excited about this? Like, it's another first time head coach. It's another defensive guy. We've done this with Saleh. We've done this with Bowles, and we've addressed this, but he is not those guys. It's a different situation. He's a different person with a different background. We also don't believe that coordinator and head coach are the same jobs. And the Jets have had success with guys with defensive backgrounds. It's when they've done all of their recent winnings since 1997. There's plenty of examples of that working. And you can't just write off Aaron Glenn as a potential head coach because he came up on the defensive side. And he has an interesting background in that he spent time scouting. Of course, he spent time playing in the league. He's worked his way up and has been attached to a program that was pulled out of the ashes like the Jets were and has become really successful in spite of a disappointing playoff loss. And there is no reason to think, again, that Ben Johnson, just because he's the most popular play caller right now, will be a better head coach than Aaron Glenn. He might be, but Aaron Glenn might be a better head coach because it's a very different job. Now, we're going to see in these coming days, what does the staff look like? Some of the early names being thrown around, I think we're all pretty intrigued and excited about. There's a lot of names, so to get overly excited about any is a little premature, but, is he going to bring a guy like a veteran like Todd Haley onto his staff? We're hearing Mike Westhoff names. McCown is even still getting thrown in the mix. We talked about Mark Brunell. Steve Wilkes is a defensive coordinator. Throwbacks galore. A lot of familiar names and faces. I think the expectation is that Glenn's going to be able to pull together a pretty impressive staff. We already have seen the reaction from the players who are going to be excited to play for him. We know he grew in the league being mentored by Bill Parcells. And yes, there is a nice nostalgia element of a lot of this for Jet fans who watched an undersized corner overperform for his physical ability and be a really easy guy to root for. And it's a lot of Jet fans of a certain age, one of their favorite players they watch growing up. So is that all going to convert to him being a great head coach? We don't know. But all of this is a crapshoot. Ben Johnson would have been a crapshoot. Todd Monken would have been a crapshoot. And part of why people were excited about Rex, like you said, is he wanted to be here. He had pride in being associated with the Jets organization. Same thing with Aaron Glenn. And for all the talk that the Jets job is the worst, the Jets job is a catastrophe. You know what job looks like a catastrophe? The Raiders job. the Jaguars job, the Saints job, all of whom, when we were doing our rankings, and I could see all the YouTube comments, you guys are homers saying the Jets are a top 2 or 3 job that's dead last. I don't necessarily think so, because there's a decent
what do we
amount
think now, right?
What do we think now, right? There's a decent amount of talent on this roster. Every group has ownership and cap issues and their own problems that come with it. And you had a guy here who's been a top head coach candidate for a couple of years now, who this was the job he wanted, and the Jets got it done. And we all panicked a little last night. He took the plane. He got his family. They paid. He's going to go build his staff. And now what I think is particularly interesting, because look, we've been excited about this, and I think most Jet fans are excited about this. I find it very hard as a Jet fan to be like, man, screw this guy. There's no way it's going to work. I just don't know how you know that and how you project to that, just because Robert Saleh stunk at his job when these guys are two completely different people.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Now, the interesting part of this right now, and that's what the surprising part is, when we were recording, I don't know, 6 hours ago, I've lost track of how many pods have happened this week. It was an assumption that Glenn and Lance Newmark were going to be the duo, and that happened because Ben Johnson went to Chicago, and that was his preferred GM candidate. But because he went to Chicago and they have a GM already, now it was opened up for him to be Aaron Glenn's guy, which in my mind never really clicked right. Like, were you Ben Johnson's guy or were you Aaron Glenn's guy? And it seemed like kind of out of nowhere that this guy was going to be the favorite. You gave 2 parts of the Newmark files breaking down the pros and cons, I would argue very fairly about this, but this guy was much less of a slam dunk than Glenn. And now it sounds like the Jets are going to do more second round interviews for GM, which is a good thing. They still may hire Newmark, but there are other names out there worth having a second round interview. You don't do no second round interviews because of Lance Newmark. Now, clearly the Jets are going to be a head coach led organization. We were texting about this in the group chat. You guys were talking a little bit about like the Pete Carroll model, where really the head coach is the guy. And he's going to partner with the GM, but the Jets hired the head coach first. And regardless of what reporting structure is, it seems like Glenn is going to be the lead guy in the building, whereas previously Joe Douglas was the lead guy in the building, and now it's going to flip to being the head coach. I mean, being honest, and I know you feel this way, I feel this way, there's other GM candidates I'd like the Jets to hire more than Lance Newmark. I'm glad this is still open. So the rest of this week got a lot more interesting, not just because of Glenn's potential staff hires, which are so important, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But now, are we getting a Halaby? Are we getting a Greenberg? Are we getting a Dimitrov? Are we getting someone else that we had completely written off? Or is it going to go back to Newmark and we record the trilogy? What was your reaction to seeing that this isn't a slam dunk now? Because it never made sense to me as like being a slam dunk, because it just didn't click. So where is your head out now on that part of the search?
I say this a lot on this podcast, and I say I do have repeatable phrases, but when you try to apply logic, it was hard to land at, man, number one, Aaron Glenn's just attaching himself to Newmark. Like, that's a thing. And if that's the case, so be it. But then also that the Jets had to do that with all these candidates out there. And like you said, Joe, they might still hire Newmark. It's not that he's out or anything like that. It is very bizarre. There's not a lot of
time.
I mean, you flew in the head coach. It's fair. Nothing has really been very, normal throughout this. But you flew in the coach that, like, you knew he was your guy, right?
Yep.
And you flew in a GM candidate for round 2 with no one else mentioned in round 2 on the same day at the same time. So what happened here? And maybe they just reached a point, and maybe it was a conversation with Aaron Glenn where it was like, hey, let's talk to more people. What's the harm? Newmark's not going anywhere, right? And watch, I say that, and he's Jacksonville's GM. And also, good for him if so. I don't care.
He could go join Saleh in Jacksonville.
Yeah, right. Perfect duo. I always thought the second round should have been more open. It is very clear the Jets want Aaron Glenn to be their Pete Carroll, that, like, this is the guy. He's the front man of the organization. He has a personnel background mixed with coaching he's number one, and he's going to be a part of the GM hiring process. And that's fine. If that's the decision you make, like, so be it, because you need to get your guy and you believe in him and all those things. And clearly that's the decision they're going down. But some wires got tripped up for this not to get done with Newmark on the day. And now it's one thing if you and I were sitting here and we're like, we just don't know. Maybe the contract's not done. Contractual language could be a very long, boring, tedious process. But you have Rich Cimini and all the beat reporters saying the second round is now opening up. Something is going on. There are going to be more people they talk to, whether there are names that they have already talked to, which is also weird because we've heard a lot of rumors. I believe Connor Hughes has been on this as well, that they've called the other people and said like, hey, thanks for coming in, but we're going to look somewhere else. And the last man standing was Newmark. Do they open this thing back up? They actually open the door back up. Are we going to hear, and this is me totally spitballing, but a Ray Agnew's name, who they didn't interview, which never made sense to me, by the way, who has been with Aaron Glenn in Detroit the entire time and has been the top lieutenant with Dorsey for Brad Holmes in that Detroit turnaround. And that's just naming a name. Like, are we going to hear now some of the names interview that we were surprised didn't interview? Nolan Teasley from Seattle, just throwing out the high-profile names that but strangely didn't get requested by the Jets. So that's number one that kind of crosses my mind. You look at this as a whole, I'm happy that now Glenn is a part of it because, quite frankly, I'm not really inspired or optimistic about the room that was conducting these GM interviews with how the process has gone. Just being totally honest here.
A very long process to get to the guy we could have told you in week 15 was probably going to be the head coach.
Phenomenal work if you can get it. If anybody out there will offer you tons of money to show them the GPS to the place they were always going, you take the job. Take the consulting job, billable hours, whatever you need to do. Great work. But yeah, this is heating up now. This is going to be, I'm really fascinated by what the pace will be of it, what the names are going to be. The Newmark files, even if he's hired, part 3 is going to be like The Godfather. It doesn't need to happen, right?
Get Andy Garcia out here.
Yeah, 1 and 2 is enough. We don't ever need to acknowledge the existence of part 3. And, if he gets the job, we've covered a lot of that already. But it would be really weird that you start talking to other people, I'm assuming with Aaron Glenn, and then maybe you do go back to Newmark because like, hey, none of these people really are a fit. But he's got to be feeling a little weird, right? Yeah. Like you probably wear your best suit.
What has he been doing the last 2 days? Guys,
right,
just
you fly into Jersey with your best suit on, ready to go, ready to sign the dotted line, get life-changing money. Not that assistant GMs don't already have life-changing money, but yeah, I'm reinvigorated by this search.
I am. Something weird is going on. Now, again, this might just be a couple more days and they end up going back to Newmark, but the search has been opened back up, right? We're going to get a couple names where they're going to have some second round conversations. Who those names are is going to be fascinating. I think we've talked a lot about Hallaby. We've talked a lot about Greenberg. I would guess there's another name that ends up in the mix. If they pull an Agnew out now at the last second, that would be fascinating. And I just think, I wonder, not to get overly optimistic as a Jets fan, because I am excited about the hire, do you get a little swirl of momentum where this is a good PR cycle for the Jets? Former players are excited about this. Current players are excited about this. 85% of the fan base is excited about this. 80, 85. I'm judging from our Discord, Patreon world and what parts of Twitter I come across. Glenn starts making a couple really highly praised hires to his staff. He gets Steve Wilks. Okay, so now we don't have to worry about Glenn being too focused on the defense because he hired a really good veteran defensive coordinator. He gets a Kubiak for offensive coordinator that everyone's fired up about. They get a special teams coordinator and finally replace Boyer. Oh, he's also bringing in Haley as an assistant head coach and Mike Westhoff as a veteran consultant because he just wants to be back with the
names we know. We recognize these names.
Fans, now all of a sudden it's like GMs, all these GMs maybe now are a little more intrigued by this opportunity. And I'm just curious to see. I just think they could do a little better than Newmark. I just think they can.
They could
do something a little higher. They could do something more high value.